Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon and watched the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. His heart was beating fast, and his hands felt sweaty. He had dreamed of this moment since he was a child, but now that it was happening, he felt nervous and excited at the same time. The station was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It looked like a giant metal flower with 12 different sections. Each section was built by a different alien race, and they all looked completely different from each other. Some parts were smooth and curved, while others had sharp edges and strange symbols carved into the metal DR. Lisa Park walked up beside him, and she was smiling so wide that her face almost hurt. She was the chief scientist on the ship, and she had studied alien life for 20 years, even though no one had ever seen a real alien before. Today all her theories and guesses would finally be tested. Commander Rick Stone stood near the weapons console, but his weapons were powered down. The military had sent him to watch and learn about alien fighting methods, but they hoped there would be no fighting today. He was a big man with scars on his face from old battles, and he did not smile much, but even he looked curious about what they would find. The communication system made a soft beeping sound, and then a voice spoke in perfect English. The voice sounded strange and cold, like it came from a machine instead of a living being. "Welcome, human vessel New Horizon 2 Nexus Prime Station. You are cleared to dock at Port 17. Please follow the guidance beacons and prepare for formal introduction ceremonies." Jake took a deep breath and tried to calm his nerves. He had commanded ships in dangerous situations before, but this was different. This was the most important moment in human history. He picked up the communication device and spoke back. "Thank you, Nexus Prime. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human ship New Horizon. We are honored to be here, and we look forward to meeting you. The docking process took 2 hours because the alien technology was so different from human systems." Dr. Park watched everything with wide eyes and took notes on her tablet. She wanted to remember every detail. Commander Stone paid attention to the security systems and the way the station was defended. He counted weapon platforms and shield generators, like he always did. When they finally docked, Jake put on his best uniform, and Lisa wore her formal diplomatic clothes. Rick kept his military uniform, but removed all his weapons. The three of them walked through the airlock and into the alien station. The first thing they noticed was the air. It smelled different, like metal, and something sweet they could not identify. The gravity felt slightly heavier than on Earth, and the walls hummed with energy from alien machines. The corridor was wide enough for 20 people to walk side by side, and the ceiling was so high they could barely see it. They walked for 10 minutes following glowing arrows on the floor, until they reached a huge circular room. The room was so big that a football stadium could fit inside it. In the center was a raised platform with 12 chairs, arranged in a circle. Each chair was different, and designed for a different type of alien body. As they walked closer, Jake could see the aliens sitting in their chairs. His heart started beating even faster, and he felt sweat on his forehead. The aliens were nothing like what he had imagined from movies and books. The closest alien looked like a giant lizard that walked on 2 legs. Its skin was dark green with yellow spots, and its eyes were bright red. It wore no clothes but had metal bands around its arms and neck. When it looked at the humans, its mouth opened slightly, and they could see rows of sharp teeth. Another alien was tall and thin, like a skeleton covered in blue skin. It had 4 arms, and its head was twice as big as a human head. Its eyes were completely black with no white parts at all. It wore flowing robes that seemed to move by themselves, even though there was no window. Third alien looked almost like a human, but its skin was silver, and it had no hair at all. Its eyes glowed with white light, and when it moved, it seemed to float slightly above its chair, instead of sitting normally. Jake felt amazed, and frightened, and excited all at the same time. He had never seen anything so strange and wonderful. Lisa was practically bouncing with excitement, and she whispered questions to herself about how the aliens breathed and what they ate. Rick stayed calm, but his hand kept moving toward where his weapon would normally be. The lizard alien stood up first, and when it spoke, Its voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. AM Ambassador Zekthar, of the Skarn Dominion. These are my colleagues from the other member races of the Galactic Federation. We have been waiting to meet the humans, who claim to be ready for galactic society. Jake stepped forward and tried to keep his voice steady, even though his heart was pounding. I'm Captain Jake Morrison, representing the human race. We are grateful for this opportunity to meet you and learn about the galaxy. Tall, thin alien with 4 arms made a sound that might have been laughter, but it was high and cold. Learn about the galaxy. The human shows typical emotional responses: fear, excitement, nervousness. These are signs of a primitive species that has not yet evolved beyond basic animal instincts. Lisa felt her face get hot with anger, and she stepped forward before she could stop herself. Emotions are not primitive. They help us make decisions and work together and care about each other. The silver alien, with glowing eyes, tilted its head and studied her like she was an interesting bug. The female human defends emotional thinking. This proves our point. Even now, when meeting superior beings for the first time, they cannot control their emotional responses. Rick felt his muscles tense up and he wanted to say something, but he forced himself to stay quiet. He was here to observe, not to start fights. But he did not like the way these aliens talked about humans like they were stupid children. Ambassadors walked down from the platform and circled around the 3 humans. His red eyes studied them carefully, and his forked tongue flicked out. To taste the air. Emotions make you weak and unpredictable. You feel fear when you should think logically. You get angry when you should stay calm. You show excitement when you should be serious. Advanced civilizations learn to control these inefficient responses, though. Silver alien floated down to join the lizard alien, and both of them stared at the humans. AM High Counselor Velinari of the Silon Collective. Our species evolved beyond emotional thinking. 3,000 years ago, we make decisions based on logic and efficiency. We do not waste energy on feelings that serve no purpose. Jake felt his anger growing, but he tried to keep it under control. He knew that getting mad would only prove their point. But it was hard to listen to them talk about emotions like they were some kind of disease. Dr. Park could not stay quiet any longer. Her scientific curiosity was stronger than her diplomatic training. But emotions help us survive. They make us care about our families and friends. They give us courage when we are scared. They help us work together as teams. The 4-armed alien made that cold, laughing sound against survival instincts, perhaps useful for primitive species, but unnecessary for advanced beings. We survive through superior technology and logical planning, not through emotional bonding. More aliens came down from their chairs to look at the humans. Each one was stranger than the last one, looked like a walking tree with barked for skin. Another was covered in blue fur and had 6 legs. A third was made of what looked like living crystal that changed colors as it moved. They all stared at the humans and talked about them in their own languages. Jake could not understand the words, but he could tell they were not saying nice things. The way they looked at humans reminded him of how people at a zoo looked at animals. Commander Stone watched the aliens and noticed how they moved and stood. They were all very formal, and their movements followed patterns like a dance that had been practiced many times. Their formations were logical and predictable. Each alien knew exactly where to stand and how to behave. The crystal alien spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. That humans show promise in technology and space travel, but their emotional nature will limit their development. They may serve useful roles in the Federation, but they are not ready for full membership. High Counselor Velinari nodded, and all the other aliens agreed. We offer humanity junior membership in the Galactic Federation. You will have access to basic trade routes and can establish colonies in designated areas. However, full membership requires species maturity beyond emotional thinking. Ambassador Zekthar showed his sharp teeth in what might have been a Vio will be assigned mentors from our various species to help you evolve beyond your current limitations. With proper guidance, humans may eventually qualify for full citizenship in perhaps several hundred years. Jake felt his face getting red, and his hands made fists. He wanted to tell these aliens exactly what he thought about their offer, but he knew he had to stay diplomatic. Lisa looked like she was about to cry from frustration, and Rick looked like he wanted to fight all 12 aliens at once. The three humans looked at each other, and Jake could see the same anger and hurt in their eyes. They had come here hoping to join an alliance of equals, but instead, they were being treated like children, who needed to be taught how to behave. Ceremony continued for another hour with various aliens, explaining the rules and restrictions. For junior members, the humans would have to follow strict guidelines, and could only visit certain parts of the galaxy. They would need permission for most activities, and would be 6 months had passed since the humans returned from Nexus Prime, with news of their rejection by the Galactic Federation. General Kate Brooks stood in the command center on Earth, looking at the massive screens that showed space around their solar system. She was a tough woman, who had fought in 3 wars, and never lost a battle, but today she felt worried. The long-range sensors had detected something that made every military leader on Earth lose sleep. A fleet of unknown ships was moving toward Federation space, and they were bigger than anything anyone had ever seen. The ships were dark and silent, like moving shadows in the void, and they came from a direction where no civilizations were supposed to exist. Dr. Alex Turner worked beside her, studying the psychological profiles of different alien species. He was trying to understand how beings without emotions made decisions in combat situations. His research had become very important since the Federation had made it clear they thought human emotions were weaknesses. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Hayes entered the command center, still wearing his training gear. He had been working with his special forces teams on new combat techniques that used emotional responses as tactical advantages. Instead of fighting their feelings, his soldiers learned to channel anger and fear into focused action. General Brooks pointed at the main screen where the mysterious fleet appeared as red dots moving across a star map. The Federation sent us a message this morning. They are calling an emergency meeting of all member species, including junior members like us. The unknown fleet will reach their outer colonies in 2 weeks. Ben studied the formation of the enemy ships and noticed something strange. They moved in perfect coordination, like they were all controlled by one mind. There were no scouts ahead of the main force and no ships breaking formation to investigate interesting objects. Everything stayed in rigid geometric patterns. Dr. Turner pulled up files on his computer and showed them to the others. I have been studying Federation military history. The aliens always fight the same way. They use logical formations and predictable strategies that worked for thousands of years. Every battle follows mathematical principles and established tactics. The communication system activated, and Captain Jake Morrison appeared on the screen. He was calling from the New Horizon, which was stationed near the edge of human space. His face looked grim and tired. General Brooks, the Federation fleet just passed our position, heading toward the unknown contacts. I counted over 2,000 ships moving in perfect formation, but something is wrong. Their formation is exactly the same one they used in training exercises. I watched them practice. Kate felt a cold feeling in her stomach. The Federation had refused to share their advanced military tactics with humans, but Jake had been smart enough to observe and learn during his visits to their space. The fact that they were using training formations against an unknown enemy suggested they were not taking the threat seriously. Ben Hayes pulled up tactical displays on his personal screen and began analyzing the Federation fleet movements. They are following standard doctrine exactly. Advanced scouts in a broad line. Main battle groups in the center. Reserve forces positioned for logical reinforcement. Every ship knows exactly where to go and what to do. Dr. Turner nodded and added his own observations. This is how beings without emotions fight. They follow rules and procedures, because that is the logical thing to do. They cannot adapt quickly to unexpected situations, because adaptation requires intuitive thinking. 3 days later, the first battle reports arrived, and they were worse than anyone had imagined. The unknown enemy had destroyed 40% of the Federation fleet in less than 6 hours. The aliens had never experienced such a devastating defeat in over 3,000 years of peace. The enemy called themselves the Drakmar, and they had once been part of the Federation before being exiled for unknown crimes. Their ships were powered by technology that seemed to predict every move the Federation forces would make. The Drakmar attacked in ways that countered every logical tactical response. General Brooks called an emergency meeting with all the top human military leaders. Everyone gathered in the main conference room, including Jake Morrison, who had traveled back to Earth at maximum speed. The mood was serious because everyone knew this war would affect humans, even though they were only junior members' fleet. Admiral Torvik of the Federation appeared on the communication screen. His blue skin looked pale, and his forearms moved nervously as he spoke. He was one of the aliens who had dismissed human emotions as primitive, but now he needed help from those same primitive humans. Human allies, we request immediate assistance in the war against the Drakmar threat. Your species will provide supply and support functions, while our main forces engage the enemy in direct combat. Kate Brooks felt anger building inside her, but she kept her voice calm and professional. Admiral, what exactly do you need from us? Our ships are not as advanced as yours, and our weapons are considered primitive by Federation standards. The alien commander seemed uncomfortable asking for help from a species he had looked down on just months before. Your industrial capacity will be useful for producing basic supplies, and your ships can transport materials to our battle fleets. However, human forces must stay away from actual combat zones for your own safety. Ben Hayes stood up and his face showed the frustration that everyone in the room was feeling. With respect, Admiral, our people want to fight. We may not have your advanced technology, but we have other advantages that might be useful. Admiral Torvik made a dismissive gesture with two of his arms. Human emotional responses would only create chaos in organized military operations. Logic and discipline win battles, not feelings and instincts. After the communication ended, the human leaders sat in silence for several minutes. Everyone was thinking the same thing. The Federation wanted their help, but still treated them like children who could not handle real fighting. Kate Brooks finally spoke, and her voice was hard. They think our emotions make us weak, but I have seen what angry humans can do in battle. Fear makes us careful. Love makes us fight harder. Determination helps us never give up. Dr. Turner pulled out his research files and spread them across the table. I have been studying the Drakmar based on the battle reports. They seem to operate as a collective mind, similar to a hive of insects. This means they can predict logical responses because logic follows patterns. But emotions are chaotic and unpredictable. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes picked up one of the reports and read through the tactical analysis. Look at this. The Federation forces did exactly what military textbooks said they should do. They formed defensive lines, established supply routes, and concentrated firepower on priority targets, but the knew exactly what they would do, and planned counters for every move. Jake Morrison had been quiet during the meeting, but now he spoke up with excitement in his voice. When I was watching Federation training exercises, I noticed something important. Every alien commander made the same decisions in the same situations. There was no creativity or improvisation, just following established procedures. Kate Brooks felt a plan forming in her mind, and she looked around the table at the other leaders. What if we ignore their orders? What if we take our ships and fight the Drakmar, using human tactics instead of Federation? Dr. Ben Hayes smiled for the first time in days, and his eyes lit up with the possibility. Guerrilla warfare, hit and run attacks, emotional responses that cannot be predicted. We could do things that make no logical sense but achieve tactical objectives. Dr. Turner was already working on his computer, calculating possibilities and running simulations. If the Drakmar collective mind works like I think it does, then truly random actions would confuse their prediction systems. They would not know how to respond to tactics that have no logical pattern. Admiral Torvik contacted them again the next day with new orders. Human forces were to establish supply depots in safe systems, far from the fighting. The Federation military would handle all combat operations, using proven strategies and superior technology. General Brooks listened to the orders, with a neutral expression, but inside, she was making different plans human forces would follow. Federation commands officially, but unofficially, some ships might get lost and accidentally end up in combat zones, where they could test new theories about emotional warfare. The war was going badly for the Federation. Every battle ended with more losses, and the Drachma seemed to know exactly what the aliens would do before they did it. Traditional military thinking was failing against an enemy that had evolved beyond normal tactical responses. Ben Hayes gathered his special forces teams and began training them for unauthorized combat missions. His soldiers learned to use fear as fuel for fast movement, anger as power for devastating attacks, and love for their comrades as motivation for impossible heroism. The Federation had rejected human emotions as primitive weaknesses, but those same emotions might be the key to winning an unwinnable war. Kate Brooks knew that disobeying orders could end her career, but she also knew that following orders would probably end the human race. She looked out at the stars and made her decision. Human ships would accidentally end up in the wrong places at the right times, and the galaxy would learn what emotional beings could accomplish when they stopped trying to be logical and started fighting like humans. The Drachma had defeated logic and discipline, but they had never faced the chaotic power of human feelings turned into weapons of war. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the Drachma supply convoy move through space in perfect formation. The enemy ships were massive black vessels that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. They moved like a school of fish, all turning and accelerating at exactly the same moment. He had received direct orders from Admiral Torvik to stay at least 50 light-years away from any combat zones, but Jake had developed a sudden problem with his navigation computer that somehow brought his small human fleet directly into the path of the enemy convoy. It was a very unfortunate accident that would probably result in a court-martial if he survived. Commander Tony Garcia stood beside him, studying the enemy formation with experienced eyes. Tony had spent 20 years commanding human warships, and he understood something that Federation aliens did not. Space battles were not chess games with predictable moves. They were wild, chaotic events where split-second decisions determined who lived and who died. Captain Sam Wilson flew his fighter squadron in loose formation around the human ships. His pilots were nervous but excited because they finally had a chance to fight instead of hauling supplies to safe locations. Sam was known throughout the human fleet for his creative flying and his complete inability to follow standard tactical procedures. The Drachma convoy consisted of 12 massive transport ships protected by 36 escort vessels. Each escort was 3 times larger than the biggest human warship and carried weapons that could destroy a city. The logical response would be to retreat immediately and report the contact to Federation Command. Jake Morrison felt his heart beating faster as he watched the enemy ships. His mouth was dry and his hands were sweaty, but underneath the fear was something else: anger at being treated like a child by the Federation, determination to prove that humans belonged in this war, love for his crew and his species that made him willing to risk everything. He opened the communication channel to all human ships, and his voice was steady despite the emotions churning inside him. All ships, this is Morrison. We are going to attack that convoy using human tactics, not Federation doctrine. Trust your instincts, follow your feelings, and show these aliens what emotional beings can do. The Drachma escorts detected the approaching human ships and immediately moved into a defensive formation that would have stopped any logical attack. The hive mind controlling the enemy fleet calculated the most efficient response based on standard military procedures and positioned each ship for maximum tactical advantage. But Jake Morrison was not thinking logically. He was thinking about every insult the Federation had thrown at humanity, and feeling the anger build up inside him like pressure in a boiler. When the emotion reached its peak, he gave an order that no military academy would ever teach: all ships attack formation chaos pattern, execute random maneuvers on my mark. Ignore all tactical doctrine, and fight like humans. The human ships broke formation and scattered in directions that made no mathematical sense. Some accelerated straight toward the enemy, while others curved away in wide spirals. Captain Wilson led his fighters in a diving attack that violated every rule of space combat, but put them exactly where the did not expect them to. Beatty, enemy hive mind, tried to calculate human intentions, but the tactical computer could not find any logical pattern in the human movements. Fear made some human pilots fly erratically. Anger drove others to take suicidal risks. Love for their wingmen caused sudden formation changes that had no strategic purpose but confused enemy targeting systems. Tony Garcia brought his ship in fast and low, using a maneuver he had learned during a bar fight on Mars. The movement was based on instinct and muscle memory, not mathematical calculations. When the Drakmar fired at where logic said he should be, Tony was somewhere completely different. Because humans did not always do what made sense, the battle became a swirling chaos of ships moving in patterns that followed emotional responses instead of tactical doctrines. Sam Wilson saw his wingman get hit by enemy fire and felt a rage so pure and focused that it burned away all logical thinking. He dove his fighter straight into the formation of escort ships, ignoring the weapons fire that should have killed him instantly. The Drakmar hive mind had never encountered anything like Wilson's berserker attack. The collective intelligence could predict logical responses to threat situations, but it could not understand how a pilot would deliberately fly into certain death just to avenge a fallen comrade. The confusion lasted only seconds, but those seconds were enough. Wilson's fighter exploded against the hull of a Drakmar escort, but his sacrifice opened a gap in their defensive formation. Human ships poured through the opening like water through a broken dam. Each pilot followed their own emotional responses instead of coordinated battle plans, and the result was a kind of beautiful chaos that no computer could predict. Engineer Lisa Chang had modified the human weapon systems based on her study of emotional response patterns. Instead of firing in controlled bursts like Federation doctrine required, her weapons fired in patterns that matched human heartbeats and breathing. The irregular timing confused Drakmar defensive systems that expected logical attack rhythms. Sergeant Mary Johnson commanded the Marines on Jake's ship, and she felt the familiar cold fear that came before every battle, but instead of fighting the fear, she embraced it and let it sharpen her reflexes. When boarding parties tried to assault the human ships, they found defenders who moved with the unpredictable speed of frightened animals protecting their territory. The Drakmar transport ships tried to escape, but human fighters pursued them with the relentless determination of hunting predators. Captain Wilson was dead, but his squadron mates carried his fury with them as they chased down enemy vessels that logic said they could never catch. Dr. Alex Turner monitored the battle from Earth and watched in amazement as his theories about emotional warfare played out in real time. The human ships achieved kill ratios that should have been mathematically impossible against superior technology. Their success came from tactical choices that made no logical sense but worked because they were completely unpredictable. The battle lasted only 40 minutes, but when it was over, 9 of the 12 Drakmar transports were destroyed, along with 20 of their escort ships. The human fleet had lost 6 fighters and 2 frigates, a victory ratio that stunned military analysts throughout Federation space. Torvik contacted Jake Morrison immediately after the battle, and his forearms were shaking with what might have been anger or confusion. Captain Morrison, you directly violated orders by engaging enemy forces in combat. Your tactical decisions showed complete disregard for established military doctrine. Jake felt tired, but also proud as he looked at the wreckage of the enemy convoy floating in space around his ship's admiral. My navigation computer malfunctioned, and we accidentally encountered the enemy. Once we were in combat, we had no choice but to defend ourselves. We used the only tactics we knew. The alien commander studied the tactical reports, and his expression showed confusion that his logical mind could not resolve. Your attack patterns make no mathematical sense. You ignored defensive formations, concentrated firepower on random targets, and used maneuvers that increased your casualty risk. How did you achieve victory against superior forces? Tony Garcia answered before Jake could speak, and his voice carried the satisfaction of a job well done. We fought like humans, Admiral. We used fear to make us faster, anger to make us stronger, and love to make us braver. Emotions are not weaknesses, they are weapons. Dar Turner received copies of all the battle recordings and immediately began analyzing them for patterns that could be taught to other human forces. What he found was both encouraging and terrifying. Human emotional responses created genuinely random tactical choices that no computer or hive mind could predict. The success against the Drakmar convoy proved that human warfare could achieve impossible victories, but it also revealed something else. The enemy was specifically targeting human forces now. The hive mind had identified emotional fighters as the most dangerous threat to their expansion plans. More human ships began developing navigation problems that led them into accidental combat with Drakmar forces. Each battle followed the same pattern. Federation ships fighting logically would be defeated, while human ships fighting emotionally would achieve victory through chaotic tactics that made no sense. General Kate Brooks watched the battle reports accumulate and felt pride mixed with worry. Her people were proving they belonged in this war, but they were also painting targets on themselves. The Drakmar collective mind was learning that humans were different, and they were adapting their strategies to specifically counter emotional warfare. The Federation began requesting detailed reports on human tactical methods, but the humans found it impossible to explain fighting techniques based on feelings instead of logic. How could they teach logical aliens to use anger as a weapon or fear as a tool when those same aliens considered emotions to be primitive weaknesses? Captain Sam Wilson had died in the first major victory, but his sacrifice became a symbol for human forces throughout the galaxy. His berserker attack showed that emotional responses could break through any logical defense if the feelings were strong enough and focused properly. The war was changing from a conflict between logical civilizations to a battle between different ways of thinking. The Drakmar hive mind represented the ultimate in collective logical thought, while human forces represented the chaotic power of individual emotional responses. Federation commanders began to realize that their 3,000 years of logical military thinking might not be enough to win this war. They needed something new and unpredictable, but learning to think emotionally was like asking them to learn to breathe underwater. The galaxy was about to discover that the most primitive species in the Federation might also be the most dangerous when their emotions were turned into weapons of war. High Counselor Velinari stood in her private chamber aboard the Federation flagship, staring at the tactical reports that made no logical sense. Human forces had achieved 7 major victories against Drakmar, fleets using methods that violated every principle of military science. Her glowing white eyes dimmed as she struggled to understand how primitive emotional thinking could defeat superior technology and logical strategy. The silver-skinned leader had spent her entire life believing that logic was the highest form of intelligence. Emotions were chaotic, inefficient responses that advanced civilizations learned to control. But the battle recordings showed human ships moving in patterns that seemed random, yet somehow achieved perfect tactical positioning. Admiral Chris Lee received an unexpected communication request from the High Counselor late at night aboard his command ship. The human admiral had been promoted rapidly after his emotional warfare tactics saved the Federation's second-largest shipyard from complete destruction. Chris was a calm man who understood that showing too much pride would offend alien sensibilities, but inside he felt satisfaction. High Counselor Velinari appeared on the communication screen, and for the first time since humans had met her, she looked uncertain. Her usual confident expression was replaced by something that might have been confusion or even fear. Admiral Lee, I must request a private consultation regarding human tactical methods. The Federation Council requires better understanding of emotional warfare applications. Chris felt surprised, because this was the same alien who had dismissed human emotions as primitive animal instincts just months ago, but he kept his voice respectful and professional, High Counselor. I would be honored to share our knowledge with the Federation. What specific information do you need? The alien leader paused for several seconds as if the words were difficult to say. We need to learn how feelings can be converted into effective military strategies. Our logical analysis systems cannot predict or counter human tactical choices. We require instruction in emotional thinking. Dr. Nina Foster arrived at Nexus Prime Station 3 days later carrying classified training materials that had never been shared with non-human species. She was a combat psychologist who specialized in teaching soldiers how to use emotional responses as tactical advantages. Nina had worked with human special forces for 15 years and understood how feelings could be transformed into weapons. The first training session took place in a secure conference room with 12 alien officers from different Federation species. Each alien had achieved high rank through logical decision-making and mathematical analysis of combat situations. None of them had ever made a choice based on feelings instead of facts. Nina stood before the group of aliens and tried to explain concepts that seemed impossible to logical minds. Emotions are not random reactions. They are information processing systems that work faster than conscious thought. Fear tells you about danger before your logical mind identifies the threat. Anger provides energy for actions that logical analysis would consider too risky. Sub-Commander Kethfel was the youngest officer in the group and the only one who seemed genuinely interested in learning. He was a Skarn-like ambassador, but his generation had grown up hearing stories about human achievements in the war. His red eyes focused intently on Dr. Forster as she continued the lesson. The key to emotional warfare is learning to trust instinctive responses instead of fighting them. When a human pilot feels fear during combat, they use that fear to fly faster and more carefully. When they feel anger, they channel it into focused aggression that breaks through enemy defenses. Tactical coordinator Zanara was a Cylon-like High Counselor Velinari, and she had never experienced anything resembling an emotion. Her people had evolved beyond such responses thousands of years ago. She spoke in the cold, logical tone that all Cylon used. Dar Foster, this appears to be random decision-making disguised as strategy. How can chaotic responses produce consistent tactical advantages? Nina had expected this question because she heard it from every logical species that tried to understand human warfare. The chaos is not random. It follows emotional patterns that are impossible to predict from the outside, but make perfect sense to the person feeling them. A human who sees their friend get killed will not calculate the logical response. They will immediately do whatever feels right, and that intuitive choice is often tactically superior. Captain Bobby Martinez commanded the first mixed human-alien crew in Federation history. His ship carried officers from 6 different species, and the early results had been disastrous. Alien crew members could not adapt to sudden tactical changes that followed emotional logic instead of mathematical planning. The breakthrough came during a training exercise when Sub-Commander Kethvel made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. The young Skarn officer was commanding a simulated battle against Drakmar forces when his tactical computer was deliberately disabled by human engineers without access to logical analysis systems. Kethvel felt something he had never experienced before, a strange urgency that seemed to come from inside his chest instead of his brain. He ordered his ship to attack in a pattern that made no mathematical sense but felt correct for reasons he could not explain. The simulated battle was a complete success. The emotional decision-making led to tactical choices that confused the Drakmar computer simulation and achieved victory with minimal casualties. Kethvel stared at the results and tried to understand what had happened to his logical thinking processes. Captain Martinez watched the young alien officer and saw the same confusion that human children showed when they first learned to trust their feelings. Instead of overthinking every decision, Sub-Commander, you just made an intuitive, tactical choice based on emotional reasoning instead of logical analysis. How did it feel? Kethvel considered the question carefully. before answering in a voice that showed genuine wonder. It felt like my body knew what to do before my mind could calculate the options. There was a sensation of rightness that guided my decisions. I have never experienced anything similar before, Foster began, working with more alien officers, and discovered that some species could learn emotional thinking more easily than others. The Skarn had suppressed their feelings, but still possessed the basic emotional responses that could be reactivated with training. The Cylon had evolved so far beyond emotions that they struggled to understand even basic concepts. The war continued, and human forces achieved more victories using emotional warfare tactics, but they also suffered casualties as the Drachma adapted their strategies. Admiral Crisp Lee realized that teaching aliens to fight emotionally might be their only chance of winning the war. Mixed crews began training together, with humans teaching emotional responses and aliens contributing logical analysis. The combination created a new kind of warfare that used both chaotic feelings and organized planning. Captain Martinez found that his integrated crew could achieve tactical results that pure human or pure alien forces could not match. The defense of Eltar Prime became the test case for emotional integration tactics. The Drachma launched their largest attack force against the Federation capital system, and traditional defenses began to fail within hours. Logical formations could not counter the hive mind's predictive abilities. Captain Martinez brought his mixed crew into the battle and immediately began using emotional tactical coordination instead of standard Federation doctrine. Human officers made intuitive decisions that alien crew members supported with logical analysis. The result was a fighting force that combined chaotic creativity with organized efficiency. Commander Kethful commanded a section of the ship's weapons and found himself making targeting choices based on feelings instead of mathematical calculations. When he saw enemy ships attacking civilian evacuation vessels, he felt something that might have been anger, and used that emotion to focus his weapons fire with deadly precision. The battle lasted 18 hours, and ended with the Drachma retreating for the first time since the war began. Mixed crews had achieved what pure logical forces could not accomplish. They had created tactical unpredictability that the hive mind could not counter while maintaining enough organization to coordinate complex military operations. Southern Federation commanders began requesting human advisors and mixed crew training. Admiral Torvik, who had originally dismissed human emotions as primitive weaknesses, now studied emotional warfare tactics with the intensity of a scholar learning a new science. The rigid hierarchy of Federation military forces started adapting to incorporate controlled chaos into their battle plans. Commanders learned to make intuitive decisions and trust feelings instead of relying only on computer analysis. The logical perfection that had protected the Federation for thousands of years was being replaced by something more flexible and unpredictable. Dr. Nina Foster established the first emotional warfare academy on Nexus Prime Station, where alien officers learned to understand and use feelings as tactical tools. The Academy became the most important military institution in Federation space because it taught logical beings how to think with their hearts instead of only their minds. The Drachma hive mind began making strategic errors as Federation forces became increasingly unpredictable. Collective intelligence that could counter any logical response found itself confused by enemies who made decisions based on feelings that could not be calculated or predicted. The galaxy was learning that emotions were not primitive weaknesses, but sophisticated information processing systems that could provide tactical advantages no computer could match. The war was becoming a battle between different forms of intelligence, and the outcome would determine whether logic or emotion would shape the future of galactic civilization. Fleet Admiral Paul Reed stood in the command center watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for the final battle against the Drachma. The enemy had launched everything they had in a desperate assault on the Federation capital system, and the outcome would determine the fate of every civilization in the galaxy. Paul felt the familiar mix of fear and determination that came before major battles. But now, He understood these emotions were tactical advantages, instead of weaknesses. The Drakmar fleet consisted of over 5,000 ships. Moving in perfect formation toward the heart of Federation space, their hive mind had calculated that destroying the capital would end organized resistance and allow them to conquer the galaxy system by system. The collective intelligence was confident that logical defensive strategies could not stop such an overwhelming force. General Sandra Kim commanded the ground forces preparing to defend the capital worlds. Her soldiers were a mix of humans and aliens who had learned to fight with emotional coordination. Instead of rigid tactical doctrine, Sandra felt proud watching Skarn warriors charge into battle with human-style fury, while Cylon officers made intuitive decisions that their ancestors would have considered impossible. Captain Danny Wright flew his fighter squadron through the outer defensive perimeter, where the first wave of Drakmar ships was approaching. His pilots included humans who fought with passionate intensity, and aliens who had learned to trust their feelings instead of only their logical training. The mixed squadrons achieved coordination that pure species groups could never match. Dr. Rachel Price monitored the battle from the command ship, while simultaneously coordinating the emotion integration protocol she had developed. The system allowed alien commanders to receive real-time emotional input from human advisors, creating a hybrid decision-making process that combined logical analysis with intuitive insight. Fleet Admiral Paul Reed opened communication channels to all Federation forces, and his voice carried the confidence that came from fighting beside warriors who understood both logic and emotional. Ships, this is Admiral Reed. We are about to face the largest military force in galactic history. Using tactics that our enemies cannot understand or predict, trust your feelings, support your comrades, and show the galaxy what emotional beings can accomplish when they fight together. The Drakmar advance guard hit the outer defensive line with overwhelming force. Traditional Federation tactics would have crumbled under such an assault, but the defenders were no longer using traditional methods. Mixed crews responded to the attack with emotional coordination that created tactical chaos. The hive mind could not predict. Captain Danny Wright led his fighters in a diving attack that followed no mathematical pattern but felt absolutely correct to every pilot in his squadron. The emotional synchronization allowed 20 fighters to move like a single organism, while maintaining the unpredictability that confused enemy targeting. System Subcommander Kath Bell had learned to fight with emotional intensity that would have horrified his ancestors. The young Skarn officer felt genuine anger when he saw Drakmar ships attacking civilian evacuation vessels, and used that fury to coordinate devastating attacks against enemy formations. His logical mind provided tactical analysis, while his emotional responses provided creative solutions. The battle became a masterpiece of controlled chaos as Federation forces abandoned logical formations in favor of emotional tactical coordination. Human intuition guided alien precision, creating fighting formations that achieved impossible results against superior numbers. Dr. Rachel Price watched her emotion integration protocol work perfectly as alien commanders learned to make decisions based on feelings instead of mathematical calculations. The system created a new form of group intelligence that combined individual emotional responses with collective logical analysis. Captain Danny Wright found himself flying in perfect coordination with alien wingmen who had learned to trust emotional impulses. The mixed squadron moved through enemy formations like dancers following music, only they could hear their attack patterns were beautiful and deadly and completely impossible to predict. The Drakmar hive mind began experiencing something it had never encountered before. Tactical confusion that led to strategic uncertainty. The collective intelligence tried to calculate Federation responses, but emotional decision-making created too many variables for logical analysis to handle. General Sandra Kim coordinated the ground defense of the capital worlds using emotional tactical principles that allowed rapid adaptation to changing battlefield conditions. Her mixed species forces fought with a combination of human passion and alien discipline that proved unstoppable against logical enemy tactics. The turning point came when Captain Danny Wright led a desperate attack against the Drakmar command ship. His squadron included pilots from 6 different species, all flying with emotional coordination that their individual cultures could never have achieved. Alone, the attack succeeded because it combined human creativity with alien precision in ways the hive mind could not counter. The Drakmar collective intelligence began to fragment as individual ships started making desperate, illogical decisions. The hive mind that had conquered through perfect logical coordination found itself defeated by enemies who fought with passionate coordination that transcended pure logic. Fleet Admiral Paul Reed coordinated the final assault using emotional, tactical principles that allowed Federation forces to achieve tactical impossibilities. Mixed crews, fighting with both logical analysis and emotional intuition, created a new form of warfare that was more effective than either pure logic or pure emotion. The battle ended when the Drakmar command ship was destroyed by a coordinated attack that combined mathematical precision with emotional timing. The hive mind collapsed, and individual enemy ships found themselves making independent decisions for the first time in their existence. Many chose to surrender rather than continue fighting a war they no longer understood. Ambassador Julie Walsh addressed the Federation Council in the aftermath of victory. Her words carried the authority of a species that had proven their worth through successful warfare instead of diplomatic requests. The galaxy has learned that emotions are not primitive weaknesses, but sophisticated tools for decision-making and tactical coordination. Humanity offers to share our knowledge with all species who wish to learn emotional integration techniques. High Counselor Velinari stood before the assembled representatives and made a formal apology that would have been impossible before the war. The Cylon Collective acknowledges that we were wrong to dismiss human emotional responses as primitive. Our species survived this war only because humans taught us to think with our hearts as well as our minds. We formally request full partnership with humanity in developing new tactical doctrines. Dr. Rachel Price established the Institute of Emotional Warfare as a permanent part of Federation military structure. The Institute became the most important educational facility in the galaxy because it taught logical beings how to integrate emotional responses into their decision-making processes. Academy trained officers from every Federation species in emotional tactical coordination. Mixed crews became standard throughout the fleet because they achieved tactical results that pure species groups could not match. The combination of logical analysis and emotional intuition created a new form of group intelligence. Former skeptic Ambassador Zekthar attended the first human-style victory celebration and struggled to understand the concept of joy. The old Skarn diplomat watched alien children playing emotional strategy games that would have been considered impossible before the war. The celebration included warriors from every Federation species sharing stories of battles won through emotional coordination instead of logical planning. Humans taught aliens how to feel pride in victory, while aliens taught humans how to analyze tactical lessons for future application. Captain Danny Wright received the highest military honor in Federation history for leading the attack that ended the war. His squadron of mixed-species pilots became symbols of the new galactic military that combined emotional creativity with logical precision. The galaxy had learned that true strength came from integration rather than elimination of emotional responses. The Federation military doctrine was completely restructured to incorporate emotional tactical principles. Alongside traditional logical analysis, Dr. Rachel Price continued developing new applications for emotional integration. Beyond military uses, the techniques that won the war also improved diplomatic negotiations, scientific research, and cultural exchange between species that had previously considered emotions to be primitive weaknesses. The final scene showed mixed human-alien crews serving throughout the galaxy, spreading the lesson that heart and mind together were stronger than either alone. The Drakmar War had ended, but the real victory was the transformation of galactic civilization from pure logic to integrated emotional intelligence. Federation space became more vibrant and creative as species learned to balance logical thinking with emotional responses. Art flourished as alien cultures discovered the beauty of feelings. Music evolved as logical beings learned to appreciate emotional expression. Technology advanced faster when intuitive creativity was combined with mathematical precision. The galaxy had rejected humanity for being emotional, but humanity had saved the galaxy by teaching others how to feel. The lessons spread to every corner of Federation space that emotions were not obstacles to advancement, but tools for achieving greater heights than logic alone could reach. Ambassador Julie Walsh stood on the observation deck of Nexus Prime Station, watching ships from dozens of species working together with emotional coordination that created beauty in the void. The galaxy had learned that the greatest strength was not the elimination of emotion, but the integration of feeling and thinking into something greater than either could achieve alone.